All right, friends, Jeff is Around the Circle, continuing with Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart, Chapter 9, Places We Go When We Search for Connection. Lots of heart-centric topics here, but the more that I got into this, she is using triads all over the place, head, heart, body, to unpack just the holistic way that we come to relationships. The emotions she talks about here are belonging, fitting in, connection, disconnection, insecurity, invisibility, and loneliness. This was a long chapter and lots to say, so we'll see how long we go here. First quote hit me right off the bat. She starts talking about belonging and fitting in up front. She writes, "We have to belong to ourselves as much as we need to belong to others. Any belonging that asks us to betray ourselves is not true belonging." There's a lot in this chapter about our relationship with ourselves. There's a lot in this chapter about loneliness. There's a lot in this chapter about both doing the internal work and doing the external work. I read a lot of this up front, her approach up front, really pushing into that almost self-pres relationship with oneself, that you have a relationship with yourself. Some of us are very low on our self-pres instinct, and that can be difficult for us. Some of us just move, we're moving out into the world, engaging the world relationally, physically, and the rest, and not doing a lot of work of shoring up our internal life. So again, her quote, "We have to belong to ourselves as much as we need to belong to others. Any belonging that asks us to betray ourselves is not true belonging." The authenticity that she elevates a lot in this section, I think, is really valuable. And I suppose naming your relationship with yourself is not the most common thing that we do. You have a relationship with yourself, and understanding yourself is a real thing. So lots to be said there. Let's keep going. She continues, "Any discussion of belonging has to start with acknowledging that love and belonging are irreducible needs for all people." This idea is going to color most of what she says in this chapter, and she unpacks this with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well worth pushing into. And that, for some of you who are familiar with what I did with spiral dynamics recently, there's a lot going on here in this chapter of the movement from beige to purple. If you're not familiar with those colors, you should go look at what I posted on spiral dynamics. There's a lot of overlap for me here. Third quote for me is on 155. "Although I started my career studying connections, shame, and vulnerability, the topic of belonging always emerged in the data. You can't study the emotions and experiences that define what it means to be a human without constantly bumping into belonging. It's just too primal." She's exactly right. We've talked extensively about this with Dr. Dan Siegel's book, and he thinks that a primary for human beings is belonging, uses the identical word. It is one of the foundational needs that we have as human beings, and our nervous system is pre-wired for it. So no shocker that this is going to be core. Fourth quote, I think this might just be on the big blue page. She writes, "True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are." Lots of stuff going on here, I think, really worth talking about. First, the move into authenticity obviously has some Enneagram buzz to it. Again, because she's a one, this is a restorative move for a one, of talking about finding who you are and finding real foundation there. More than this, however, I think she's correct, and this probably transcends all the types. There's something about getting your motive figured out within in healthy ways that allow you to spill your best self outward I am a big believer in this kind of thinking, that you shore up the foundation of your heart, of your mind, of your soul, getting grounded. This is what spiritual practices are, and this is what she's referencing. They are meant to ground you in your sense of self-identity and your connection to everything prior to what you do in relationship to others. The healthiest people are in that space. They've just done the business. They've done the work of grounding themselves in what matters most, having a strong sense of self, and from there, pouring into others. A lot of times we do this backwards. We grab for identity purpose in the relationships that we have, and we outsource that foundation to the opinions and the strengths of others. We become codependent, and this obviously creates all the things that codependency creates. So that's not a healthy move. And it seems to me wise. This just seems to me wise. So, fifth quote for me, page 158. She quotes a former book, Braving the Wilderness. When I dug deeper into what they meant by spiritually disconnected, the research participants described a diminishing sense of shared humanity. Over and over, participants talked about their concern that the only thing that binds us together now is shared fear and disdain, not common humanity, shared trust, respect, or love. Reluctant to choose between being loyal to a group and being loyal to themselves, but lacking that deeper spiritual connection to shared humanity, they were far more aware of the pressure to fit in and conform. I think she's describing a temptation for us all, but I imagine this would be much more severe for 2s, 3s, and 4s. Again, I want to pitch the idea that on Enneagram front, holy ideas as grounding, the virtues as targets, are really worth elevating when doing this kind of work in business. I can't recommend Don Risso's book, Enneagram Transformations, enough. It's my favorite Enneagram book. And unfortunately, here's the secret. I actually need to stop saying that because I steal so much from that book in terms of elevating some of my own thoughts. I just think it just routinely hits the nail on the head. But she brings up a new idea here in terms of what is it that is connecting us. I have a big commitment to the idea that we commune over something. There's no relationships that we have outside of maybe romantic relationships that aren't built around some shared something. We love the same topics. We have the same future. We share the same workspaces or environments. Naming the thing that we share with others really matters. Here she's spinning it in the negative. What's uniting us sometimes is fear, is disdain, not something like trust, respect, or love. I think that's really valuable. Next quote, we can never truly belong if we are betraying ourselves, our ideals, or our values in the process. That is why it's a mistake to think that belonging is passive and simply about joining or going along with others. It's not. Belonging is a practice that requires us to be vulnerable, get uncomfortable, and learn how to be present with people without sacrificing who we are. When we sacrifice who we are, we not only feel separate from others, but we feel disconnected from others. And then she goes into how she did an exercise with 8th graders that was kind of worthwhile. It actually exposed kind of what it looks like for young, what's the primal motive, social skills that are kind of there when we're at those formative stages where this is the thing that matters. Bonding with the tribe is what matters. I thought that was helpful. But I think there's 2 things worth saying here. Yes, it's true. Belonging requires us to bring our authentic self. Otherwise, we're just fitting in. And fitting in is not belonging. It's likewise the case that not everyone receives you as you are. And this can be really tricky and difficult. We put ourselves out there in relationships to be received as our authentic self. And sometimes that is not received. Or even when it's received, we have a hard time having it received. maybe because we are not very comfortable with our authentic selves. Lots to be said here in terms of self-perception and what our understanding of ourselves, when we offer ourselves to others, if it's received. The more that, like, I'm really wrestling with this right now, personally, thinking through that I don't think it's very common for our authentic selves to be received. Sometimes people don't have the energy for that. Sometimes it's just like you're not the person they're looking for. Sometimes it's the case that the person in front of you may appear healthy, but they're just a train wreck. And so the rejection of you has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with their own psychosis. It might be the case that, like, the timing is just skewed. You know, we could go through a laundry list of things that happen in our relationships where things just don't connect, in friendships, with our kids, with our parents, with our romantic partners. There's all sorts of things we're saying here, but I think her doubling down again and again on self-understanding and then being vulnerable, get uncomfortable, learn how to be present without sacrificing who you are. That's a recipe for pain. It's also a recipe for connection. And that's what I think about that. Jumping forward, belonging and uncertainty. She has a bunch of stuff that she wants to say just to close this with just personal illustrations, which are valuable. Her next section that I thought was interesting was on connection and disconnection. This is page 169. The RCT theorist Judith Jordan, RCT is relational cultural theory. Judith Jordan writes, the need for connection, in which growth is a priority, is the core motivation in people's lives. In growth-fostering relationships, people are able to bring themselves most fully and authentically into connection. From an evolutionary perspective, connection was about survival. Today, it's about what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Research shows that people who have strong connections with others are happier, healthier, and better able to cope with the stresses of everyday life. Point of personal privilege. My favorite material in all of philosophy is Aristotle's 3 levels of friendship. Some of you may have heard me say this, but I'll do it very briefly. You can look this up if you want. Aristotle says there's 3 types of friendship. The first and most basic is friendships that are based on usefulness or utility. So we have a relationship with the grocer. We have a relationship with our mail carrier. We have a relationship with our customers that we serve as baristas. There is a utility here. Some teachers are this way with students. Like, you have shown up to my class. I provide you knowledge. You provide me a salary. Utility. The mail carrier provides me mail. I ensure that the mail carrier is funded with, my tax dollars, as it were. Or I go to the hairstylist, and there's it's you're useful, I'm useful. That's how a lot of our interactions work. Some of our work relationships are this way. Like, you know how to do the budgeting. I know how to do advertising. We work together. We're useful. A second level of friendship for Aristotle is based on pleasure or shared common interests. So I like Pearl Jam. You like Pearl Jam. We unite together around our common love of Pearl Jam. I'm a Denver Bronco fan. You're a Denver Bronco fan. We love the Broncos. We get together on Sundays and we watch the Broncos. I love knitting doilies. You love knitting doilies. We need to get together, watch the Broncos, listen to Pearl Jam, and knit us some doilies. That, my friend, is a party. Pleasure, shared pleasure. It's commonly the place that a lot of our friendships, the people that we call friends, they commonly start in this space. Sometimes they start with usefulness. Sometimes they start with common pleasures. But when we say, like, this is my friend who I go bike riding with, this is my friend who I play racquetball with, this is my friend who, etc. We elevate, again, that magnet, that source of community between us. There is something that unites us that isn't just the relationship. There is something between us Pearl Jam, Broncos, doily, knitting, etc. So usefulness or pleasure. Now, what Aristotle says is that the thing about these two types of relationships is they are good. Most of our relationships are of this sort, but they're not lasting. When the usefulness dies down, when you don't need a haircut, you're not talking to your hairstylist anymore. When the pleasure dissipates, when you're just no longer into Pearl Jam and the Broncos suck this year, you're just not having the same pleasure with that person that you once did. And when the usefulness or the pleasure is removed, then the friendship tends to, gravitate away. We don't connect anymore. Aristotle says there's a third form of friendship, and it's based on something that's lasting. It's everlasting. It's based on our happiness. And happiness for Aristotle is always about virtue. So we connect. The third level of friendship is around the good life. If you are committed to the good life and I'm committed to the good life, then we can connect over I want you to thrive and you want me to thrive. And this is what the best kinds of relationships are. This is what she, in this quote from Judith Jordan, is saying: the need for connection in which growth is a priority is the core motivation in people's lives. I feel like that is an overstatement, but I feel like it's subconsciously true. You are made for relationships in which you grow. You are made for relationships in which you are encouraging the growth of others. Like, these are the deepest forms of relationship. And what's interesting here is that commonly we don't just jump into, hey, I'm pursuing the good life. Perhaps you're pursuing the good life. Let's get together and talk about the good life. That seldom takes place. But normally, most of our relationships start around, look, you're useful to me, I'm useful to you. And then we build a relationship that kind of builds into that. I actually care about you. Like, it may be the case you've been seeing the same hairstylist for years, and she asks you about your marriage, which is having difficulty, and you share, this is what's going on with me. That's the move. That's the move from that tier 1 friendship to tier 3, because now there's care that's taking place, and maybe sharing, how can you grow? How can I grow? Sometimes we're at the Bronco game and talking not about the football game in front of us, but talking about the fact that I need to quit drinking. And that's a move. It's a move from the shared pleasure of the Bronco game to I need to get my life under control and become a better person, become more moderate, etc. I find that very helpful. Last two thoughts here is, one, oftentimes what's interesting about third tier relationships is when you're pursuing the good life, the usefulness can evaporate. The pleasure can evaporate, but you still care for the person in front of you. I'm rewatching The Bear right now, which we'll probably record on because I want to talk about Enneagram 1s and the Carmi character. But the thing that happens at the end of season 1 is his cousin, Richie, is put in prison or incarcerated for hitting a man, and the man goes unconscious and isn't waking up, and this is terrifying. Wakes up, Carmi bails out his cousin and Richie says, "Where'd you get the money?" He says, "I spent our 2 weeks umbrella," which is essentially, I have money to have our restaurant work, and I spend it all on getting you out of prison. And Richie says to him, "You're the only thing I have." Real meaningful scene there. It's the last episode of the first season. But bailing somebody out with the money you need for your business, that's not useful. And it sure isn't pleasurable. Nobody likes writing that check. But the commitment to the good life elevates over everything. And I find that helpful. So often, we could even categorize our romantic relationships across this. Is this a marriage of usefulness? You can imagine what that looks like. Arranged marriages or gold diggers or something like that. Is this a romantic relationship that's based on pleasure? This is real common. This is where most of our romantic relationships start is I love this, you love this. We connect in a romantic way because we're in this together and enjoying this. And obviously romantic relationships have the extra benefit of other sorts of pleasures that go alongside them. But you can have a romantic relationship that's entirely about the pleasure you're experiencing with the beloved in front of you. They have to, if they're going to last, they have to move into that third tier. They have to move into that space where it's not about the usefulness or the pleasure. Yes, you're useful. You help me pay the cable bills and clean the bathroom when I can't, and take the kids to school. That's useful. There is pleasure. Like we love going out to dinner. We love going out to movies. We discuss books, etc. The usefulness and pleasure can be there, but in a romantic relationship, it has to get to that spot where I care about you, your growth, your good. That has to be core motivation, as Judith Jordan writes, for a romantic relationship to last. I find that really helpful. I find that really insightful. And you could even talk about this with your religious connection to God. Is God useful? Here are my prayers. I need something from you. Is God a source of pleasure? I go to these buildings on Sunday and I have these ecstatic religious experiences and I feel so good about myself. Or is it the case that the connection with God transcends all of that and you're shaping your soul in connection with God in a way that sometimes is incredibly uncomfortable and doing business with your own growth? The principle kind of transcends a bunch of different categories. I think that's helpful. Quote 9 for me, 169. Across my research, I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Again, notice the triads here. Seen, heard, valued. I bet we could put those into the centers. Can give and receive without judgment. Derive sustenance and strength from relationships. And then the end, when they can give and receive without judgment, that's very mental. And when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship, that feels very physical. But of course it's in relationship, and so it's emotional. 3-part humanity. Head, heart, body, all over these kinds of descriptions. And guess what? I'm here for it. Quote 10 for me. Here's how Judith Jordan explains disconnection. Relational cultural theory sees disconnections as normative. You need to hear that. Disconnections happen. And they're inevitable. I need to hear that. Sometimes things break. Disconnections occur when one person misunderstands, invalidates, excludes, humiliates, or injures the other person in some way. Acute disconnections occur frequently in all relationships. If they can be addressed and reworked, they are not problematic. In fact, they become places of enormous growth. I think that's helpful on one front. It's also the case that just sometimes disconnection happens. Things fade. Again, the magnet that's holding you together relationally is gone. And when it's gone, things just move apart. Sometimes you're not useful anymore. The relationship isn't useful. And it didn't transcend into one of the other two spaces. Sometimes the pleasure dries up. And that's just how it goes. Sometimes your definition of what's good, I know this is one, sometimes your definition of what is good, healthy, and the best life is severely skewed from the person in front of you's definition of the good, meaningful, purpose-filled life. This is, again, to pitch my spiral dynamics post that I just put. It's really worth naming that as we mature in these huge bursts and jumps. And oftentimes when we jump to the next level, that's a new definition for us of what the good life is. So if I'm moving from the good life is about thriving, competing, winning for myself, that ego valued life, if that's what's primary, and then I find conversion into a religious system, I'm not hanging out with Joe, the ego-driven, gonna take on the world person much anymore because we have different primary values. So too, sometimes we centered our life so much on belief, on the religious system that we were part of, and that was our connecting point. That was the meaning foundation, the growth point in our life. And then we started to question that belief system. And when we did, we couldn't stay. We couldn't be authentic to ourselves, and we had to leave, right? We may have even seen some problematic stuff with the leader and said, it's time for me to go. I need to devote myself to what's rational, reasonable, what's practical, that move in spiral dynamics from blue to orange. And you see how this works. Like a lot of people leave a church community, for example, and lose all their friends. But that's because the definition of the good life changed. And that's just how that works, right? And we could talk through all the steps working in that way. But sometimes that separation occurs for different reasons, it seems to me, than misunderstanding, invalidation, exclusion, humiliation, or injury. But Dr. Brown again lands the plane and uses the word hurt. Disconnection hurts at the bottom of 171. Disconnection is often equated with social rejection, social exclusion, or social isolation, and these feelings of disconnection actually share the same neural pathway with feelings of physical pain. Come on. You feel that separation in your chest. Insecurity. This is page 173. You're going to notice the triad. Domain-specific insecurity. Physical safety, food insecurity, being financially stable. This sounds like it's about your body, and it's not. Heart types are worried about their resources, and resources are one of the things that the head center brings forward as primary. Second, relational or interpersonal insecurity. That is, you're having a problem with Joe. Joe and you're in a fight. You're insecure because things just seem strange at times with Joe. And of course, that's your heart center. Lastly, general or personal insecurity occurs when we are overly critical of our weaknesses. This may include being overly critical of our body image or our performance at work. For example, I feel really insecure when I have to present to my manager and the leadership team. I'm a terrible speaker. A lot of this about your body, and as I was reading it, weakness, performance, body image, lots of that internal focus towards oneself. And I imagine there's probably some overlap between head, heart, and body across all three of those forms of insecurity. But I thought that was fun as a little triad worth naming. Quote 12 for me, 174. What's really interesting about their research findings is that we can have high self-esteem but still be insecure if we're overly critical of our imperfections. Because our self-esteem is an assessment of who we are and what we've accomplished compared to our values and our goals. Even with high self-esteem, we can still feel insecure if we're self-critical, and that's powerful. Love this quote. I'm actually really curious how other types wrestle with self-criticism. It's again the case, one that I am, one that she is. This might get elevated differently, so I'd really like to talk about that Tuesday. By the way, we get together online Tuesday nights to discuss this book. There's about 20 of us, 30 of us who can make it from time to time. Would love to have you. If you're interested, go to Around the Circle, find the link to this recording, and there will be a link in the notes of that recording showing you where to go, how to sign up. It's good times. 175, invisibility. Given that we are all here to be seen, known, and loved, again, notice the triad. Given that we are all here to be seen, known, and loved, invisibility is one of the most painful human experiences. This is a lack in all of the centers relationally: seen, heart, known, head, loved, body. There seems to be something there. And she continues, I define invisibility as a function of disconnection and dehumanization, where an individual or group's humanity and relevance are unacknowledged, ignored, and or diminished in value or importance. She's going to spend a lot of time on the groups as well. This minority isn't seen by our culture, by our government, or even abused by our government or demonized, that is really worth naming. Justice means that we see people with equity. She mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion earlier. Equity in how we treat other human beings means seeing other human beings equally, and that seems to me real valuable. So she closes with loneliness. Again, quotes a researcher who defines loneliness as perceived social isolation. Dear friends, notice the triad: perceived, head; social, heart; isolation, physical. Perceived social isolation is what loneliness is. There is a holistic side to loneliness, well worth naming, and I think she does right by including it all. And perhaps some of the solutions to not being lonely are found in those opposites as well. So she writes, Capapio, one of the researchers, explains that loneliness is not just a sad condition. It's a dangerous one. The brain of social species have evolved to respond to the feelings of being pushed to the social perimeter, being on the outside, by going into self-preservation mode. When we feel isolated, disconnected, and lonely, we try to protect ourselves. In that mode, we want to connect, but our brain is attempting to override connection with self-protection. That means less empathy, more defensiveness, more numbing, and less sleeping. Unchecked loneliness fuels continued loneliness by keeping us afraid to reach out. Again, to bring up spiral dynamics, this is just that backwards step. Sometimes we step backwards in our maturity and our growth and our movement through, those levels. And this is beige. You're just returning to a hyper self-awareness, self-protection side of things. Well worth noting. She writes, and this is the last quote for me: to combat loneliness, we must first learn how to identify it and to have the courage to see that experience as a warning sign. Our response to that warning sign should be to find connection. That doesn't necessarily mean joining a bunch of groups or checking in with dozens of friends. Numerous studies confirm that it's not the quantity of friends, but the quality of a few relationships that actually matter. This strikes me as wise. Again, to kind of close with Aristotle, quality of friendships and connections has an almost everlasting quality to it. Like there's infinite good. Some goods are infinite. You can never have enough knowledge. You can never have enough wisdom. You can never have enough character. This is Aristotle's view. It seems like our friendships have that sort of quality as well, that you can always go deeper, and you don't need to be friends with everybody, but you do need to be friends with some people and go for quality. That might be just something worth naming for all of us. Who are your friends? Who are the people that really care about your heart, who you trust, who are in your circle of vulnerability, who actually today deserve more attention, deserve more of your investment? You don't need 12 more friends. You need to invest in the one or two or three. And in fact, sometimes when we have a friend group, that's like one of the biggest delights, because Joe brings out the best colors in Sally, who brings out the best colors in Fred. And when Fred's gone, like, it all doesn't kind of work. But when we're all together, like, there's something that's a spark and a joy and a treasure. Those treasures are worth naming, investing in. This is a place, this is her only really a huge recommendation, I suppose, for moving beyond loneliness. Quality, go for quality. Love that. See you on Tuesday night. If you want to join us, it's 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. Go to aroundthecircle.org. Sign up for a membership. You go to the link for any of the Atlas of the Heart recordings. There should be a link that sends you to the sign up for our group. You'll get a Zoom link. We have a great time, and I would love to see you there. As I say nearly every time, the book club isn't for everybody, but it might be for you. And one of the things about those sorts of studies, and it's real interesting about Enneagram. Enneagram is one of those places where sometimes it is about pleasure. Like, you're like, this is really fun. I'm kind of interested in, personality typing. And I just get into personality typing. It produces kind of a joy. Sometimes personality typing is useful. It makes your marriage better, it makes your family better, and it helps you with the conflicts at work, knowing that I'm a 3 and she's a 7, and this is why we end up having spats. So Enneagram is useful. Enneagram can be a place of pleasure. Here's the thing, and this routinely gets me both in trouble, but I'm deeply committed to it. I generally just jump right to that 3rd level with folks and say, look, I'm here to do work on myself. I assume you are too. So let's not fuck around and let's talk about some stuff. If that's you, I would love to meet you. Join up with us. Again, aroundthecircle.org. May all good things be yours.